Hello again, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the respiratory system. We're going to move on with the external anatomy and move into the internal anatomy. And this is kind of a perfect point for this because it's both the respiratory system is both external and internal. So we've talked about the thoracic anatomy and the abdominal anatomy, and there is a characteristic that is present on both the thorax and the abdomen called the spiracles, which I haven't mentioned because I wanted to save it for this point where we kind of shift from external to internal morphology. So the respiratory abilities of insects are semi-passive. They don't have lungs or book lungs like spiders do. They don't have lungs like mammals do. They have a series of tubes that run through the body called trachea. And these trachea open to the external body wall through a series of holes called spiracles. So this image in front of you that I'm showing you here, this is a sawfly larva. It kind of looks like a caterpillar, but it's actually a wasp. And you can kind of tell because it doesn't have probe legs like a caterpillar, and it has these big eyes, which are very distinctive for sawfly larvae. But they feed on plant tissue just like caterpillars do. And if we zoom in here, and it can be kind of hard to see sometimes, on the pleural membrane of the body, on the thorax and the abdomen, you have these sclerotized plates visible. And these occur one per body segment, and these are the spiracles. And this is where the external gas exchange occurs. Insects can have up to 10 spiracles. They usually have fewer than that. They usually have like 8 or 9. They usually don't have them on every body segment. There are never any on the head. Usually there's just like one set on the thorax, but sometimes there's more. But it's mirrored, so there'll be one on the left side, one on the right side. And these spiracles are sclerotized on the outside, and they are partially sclerotized on the inside. Behind this is the trachea, which is this tube that extends throughout this tube system extends throughout the body and allows for gas exchange. If you are attempting to identify an insect, there will frequently be questions in a dichotomous key about the size, shape, number, coloration, and position of the spiracles. And these can be extremely useful for insect identification. So if you can kind of see them here. There's not a ton to look at when you're not under like super high magnification. It usually just appears to be a brown or black hole or slit in the side of the body. It's always sclerotized in order to stabilize it so it doesn't collapse in under its own weight while the gas is being exchanged. And if I have a drawing here of what it looks like zoomed in and from a cross section. So this is what a cross section of the spiracle would look like. So this is this outer part here. So this is body wall. So this is the body wall, and then you have this hole in the body wall. The sclerotized plate around the spiracle is called the peritreme. So that's what I have here. And then frequently, not always, but frequently, there's a filter mechanism right within the peritreme, which is frequently covered in seedy or fine microstructure hairs, in order to catch any debris that will be coming in to the tracheal system. This is extremely useful because not only do you want to keep things like dust out, but you want to keep pathogens out, like fungal spores, because once it gets sucked in this way, it can have easy access into the body. So this is kind of like similar to how humans have cilia within their lungs and in their throat and stuff to prevent the accumulation of pathogens and dust. There's always a valve mechanism within the spiracle. So this valve can be open and shut as needed to keep things out, or keep water out, keep dust out, things like that. And then behind that valve is where the actual trachea starts. The trachea is a tube that goes into the body, and it is reinforced with a series of sclerotized rings called tenidia. Think of this like if you've ever messed around behind your dryer at home, you have a dryer hose and it's I want to say corrugated, but it's reinforced by a ring system that keeps it from collapsing in on itself as the air moves through it. This slinky-like rings around the trachea, the tenidia, prevent the tenidia from collapsing as gas is exchanged in and out, and as the body moves, because if it collapsed, obviously the insect would suffocate. And these trachea go into the body. They start off large. Sometimes they'll enter immediately into an air sac, but they generally taper down. So this is what the inside, this is an old drawing, but this is what the tracheal system can be imagined like inside of an insect. You have spiracular openings on the side of the body, here, you know. This is kind of what you would think of as a primitive insect. And the gas goes into the body, and the trachea end up joining together to form this mesh network of tubes to the body, these sclerotized tubes, and this is to get gas throughout the body. As the tubes go into the body, they shrink down, and these shrink into what are called tracheoles, and this is where the actual gas exchange occurs. Frequently, the ends of these tracheoles are not sclerotized. They're very soft. They're living tissue, and they will abut into the individual cells of the insect body. So insects don't have red blood cells like mammals do. They have hemolymph with the only cells in there being hemocytes, which are more like immune cells. All of the gas exchange has to occur with cells butting up directly against the tubes themselves, these tracheal tubes themselves. So these tubes will extend very, very fine to the point where it gets down to about 1 micron. What is that? 1/1000th of of a millimeter? I can't remember. Very, very small. And so it's 1 micron, and that is where the gas exchange will occur. So these tubes run throughout the body, including from the thorax and abdomen up into the head, and this is how the gas exchange occurs. If we look at some other versions of these are tracheal diagrams, you can see that the tracheoles get very, very fine, and this is where the gas exchange occurs. Sometimes, frequently with like bees and beetles and wasps and things, the trachea will, right beneath the cuticle, expand into large air sacs. And this does a couple different things. One, it lightens the insect to have all of these sacs around because they're hollow, so it's kind of a negative space that helps lighten the insect for flight. But these sacs can also be pumped. So it's not just passive respiration. The insects can use their musculature to pump these sacs, these air sacs, in order to bring in more oxygen. This is particularly useful during flight because of the number of calories which have to be burned in order for an insect to fly. So insects that spend a lot of time flying tend to have a lot more air sacs. So if you were to cut open a bee, a honeybee, you would see lots and lots of tracheal air sacs throughout the body, whereas an insect that rarely flies is not going to have such enormous air sacs. So that is your introduction to the trachea. It's not a super complicated topic. There are some variations to all of these systems, like insects with gills will have a gill out, and the trachea will extend into the gill, and the gas exchange occurs in the water. But every insect group is different, so if you're interested in the tracheal system for a specific group, you should look that up separately because there's too many variations to go over here. But now we'll move into the internal anatomy of insects, and we have a lot to cover there. Talk to you next time.